Konnichiwa from your host Jose
And that thing.
and Irashaimase to A Drink with the Past, where we discuss areas of global history from its success and tragedies while we enjoy some drinks. On today's docket, we are still exploring Japan and discussing all things geisha. Our drinks for this episode is authentic Fukumitsuya sake from Kanazawa, courtesy of our traveler from Japan.
Yes, that's right. So, Kanazawa, again, if you've seen my episode, was actually a place where you can find one of the oldest sake breweries in Japan, and specifically the Fukumitsuya Sake Brewery was actually in operation since 1625.
Interesting.
So, this is a brand called Kagatobi, really. Called
Okay.
Kagatobi, and again, it's a pretty old and unique sake, which I was happy to get. This is actually the first time I actually got this specific brand of sake, because the last time I went to Kanazawa, I got another brand of sake. I forgot the name of the sake though, but nonetheless, it was like a different style sake. But for sure, I decided to get this one because this was also one of the ones that I did try. So I'm gonna open it and tie it now
All right.
because it's neatly tied.
All right.
Yeah, but for sure in this brewery that I went to, you could do sake tasting. You could do sake tasting. So they'll give you a wide variety of sakes to test, and basically, yeah,
Alright.
it's just like a wine tasting here in the States, but instead of that, it's sake. So I'm gonna open
Good to know.
it. Good to know. So.
Also, for those that plan on drinking today, drink responsibly. Uh, if you are excited to hear this discussion, feel free to pour whatever drink of choice.
Oh, look at that color.
All right.
That color looks so beautiful.
And kanpai
Come by
as we take a drink with the past. Okay. So, you brought this topic to my attention a few days ago. Have you seen, at least from this last time they went to Japan, have you had a chance to see any geishas in public, or at least in your time that you spent there?
Actually, not the first time I went to Japan. I actually was not able to have the privilege or the honor to have seen a geisha in person, but when I went recently, that was when I was able to have met a geisha in person. And let me tell you, it was actually one of the best experiences I've ever had, ever, during my
Okay.
trip to Japan.
So, who are geishas?
So, in retrospect, so let me make this very clear. The word of geisha, the translation of geisha in the Kyoto dialect means person of art or artist, to put it
Okay.
frank, and that's in the Kyoto dialect. So, the geishas are basically artists, all right? They're artists who entertain with dancing, music, conversation, and other arts at banquets, which are held at local tea houses, okay? So basically, nowadays, geishas also promote the traditional Japanese culture, right? And in Kyoto, geishas are called um, gaiko, which
Gaiko.
which means art child, and the young practice sense of it, right? The young ones are called maiko, which is translated to dance child,
Okay.
right? So basically, that's what they are. They're just artists, all right? They preserve the culture and the tradition of Japan, basically.
So, you said that they uphold the traditions. What kind of traditions are they usually upholding in the tea houses?
So the traditions really is just art, just paintings of landscapes, other sceneries of animals. And over the years, ever since the opening of Japan, you know, these artists had actually brought a lot of fascinations within Western people, right? Especially with tourists, with non East Asians,
Uh
right?
huh.
So basically anyone outside of Japan, Korea, China, right? You know, these people have brought these great fascinations to them because they're like kind of like shrouded in mystery. They're kind of view like you, it's like it's just mysterious. They're just like mystery. They're like exotic, right? They're like wonder. It's like a wonder to them,
You think
right?
that's what draws people's attention? Is just the fact that they're elusive and mysterious,
Like
or is
curious.
okay?
It was like curiosity. It brings the curiosity out of the foreigners into like knowing how the geishas are like from their makeup, their hairdos, like their wigs, and especially their kimonos,
Hmm.
right? It's just the way they're dressed is what brings in the
Hmm.
fascination for them.
Okay. So, where do geishas originate from, as far as history wise?
So this is something that most people do not know, but the first geishas were actually men,
Okay.
which they were known as taikomochi, all right, taikomochi, all right, and that
Taikomochi.
taikomochi, right, and their job was basically to entertain guests by dancing and singing by the Kamogawa River, right, and this was like around 600 AD. We're looking at about 600 AD, so literally like hundreds of years before the Edo period in 1600, and
Okay.
where the current geisha is sprung up, right? So at first, these jobs were left for the men, right? And because the men were basically the ones who would tell stories and who would sing, right? These great tales of Japanese history, right, etc., right? So this was all done by the men at first, but
Okay.
right, which no one knows, right? And I would say it's a funny thing, especially when it comes with geishas, and when I talk about kabuki theater, right?
Kabuki theater.
With the actors of the kabuki theater, right? Because right, I mentioned right now that at first geishas were men, whereas in kabuki theater it used to be the women when it first started, right? But then all of a
Right.
sudden, when the Edo period comes around, right, um, after the victory of Tokugawa Ieyasu at the Battle of Sekigahara, and when his family had basically officially grabbed the military commander position, the supreme military commander position of Japan from the emperor in 1600, right? That was where a lot of the roles would be shifted, right? So
Okay.
the geishas would be taken over by the women who worked in these tea houses, right? As servers, right? The women would take over the positions of the geishas, and then for the kabuki theater, it's the men. The men would end up taking the roles of actors in kabuki theater, especially with taking over the role of women in the theater.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
yeah, so that's where we get the current image of the geisha. It was from the beginnings of the Tokugawa shogunate of the government,
Okay.
right? So basically, before then, right? Yeah, you have the men who used to do the entertainment, but all of a sudden, the serving girls would begin singing and dancing, right, for the customers too, where eventually they would displace the male geishas because, who would the guests rather see dancing and singing, right? right? It's not man, right? It's like if a man's trying to talk to you, like trying to tell you something, the other guests are just looking at the women. It's like, yeah, just shut up, shut up. Let me look at this. Let me look at the women. The woman's the one that's more entertaining than you, right? So that's how eventually, like I said, like in the Edo period, that's when women officially took over the role of being the geishas, right?
Okay.
And basically, at first, their names were known as Saburuku, right?
Saburuku.
Saburuku. It was a name given to the girls who served the tables, right? And literally, that's just a translation to those who served.
Okay.
All right, so that was their first name. That was the geisha's first name.
All right.
And so we jump into the Edo period, right?
Okay. So now we go to Edo. And what's happening during the Edo period?
So in the first Edo period, pilgrimages to shrines were encouraged by the government to the people of Japan, because since
Just to any shrine or a specific one?
to the great shrines around the country, right? So of course, the Kitano Tenmangu Temple, right? The shrine, right? That was one of the main places pilgrims had to go to in Kyoto, right?
Okay.
And the shogun at the time, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, he held a great party in the area, and he gave his consent for the Kamishi Chiken district to operate there under the government's orders, right? And obviously, he loved the dango, which was the sweet rice on skewers, right?
Yeah,
So it's like a kebab, but it's just sweet rice, right?
Is
More
it
like
like
a
your
rice cake, like a rice cake.
Okay, I've
It's like
seen
a
a rice cake from Pokemon, but I'm assuming it's like the.
Well, that's a rice ball.
But no,
The rice cake is.
I've never. Well, I mean now I know, but it's interesting to know. I realized you could put. Never tried that rice cake on a skewer.
Exactly. So to take advantage of the new influx of tourists, small snack houses sprung up around that shrine, and eventually they would become the tea houses that we know today. That's packed with tourists and locals all day long, and that is actually the foundation of the Gion district. That was basically
the Gion district.
Yeah, that was the beginnings of the Gion district.
Is it just like the mecca of tea houses in Gion?
You can call it that way. It's basically the mecca of the tea houses, but also like the mecca of the geishas.
Oh, so that's where it
Ge-
starts in
Officially, like where they had their own little thing in Kyoto.
Gotcha.
That was the foundations of it, right?
Huh.
So,
Alright.
so after the Meiji Restoration movement, right, of the 1860s, it continues being just the way it is, right? World War II, though, right, the population of the geisha artisans grew higher before the war. So before World War II, the geishas were at an all-time high. But then they ended up becoming like this rival professions of the jokyu, or basically the cafe girls.
Okay.
Right? They become like this rival. But unfortunately, a lot of the geisha districts ended up closing in 1944 because of the low rates, right? Because
Just not as many people going to the tea houses.
yeah, or like a lot of women becoming geishas, because at that time, a lot of the geishas ended up going to the factories.
Yeah.
And while others ended up just going out into the world, like going into other places, right? And it was actually during that time where the geishas' reputations lowered, right? But of course, one of the reasons was the prostitutes who began to refer to themselves as quote-unquote geisha girls.
Geisha girls.
Yeah.
Okay.
Prostitutes sprung up where they misrepresented the geisha, like only themselves geisha girls, right? So then you go to the post-war, which is basically from 1950 to 1973, right? Even though the profession declined during the war, the post-war period actually, you see a light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, I mean, because they probably aren't needed at the factory anymore, so they can just come back to their life, the Gion district, and work back in the tea houses.
Exactly, yeah. So being a geisha now was considered a successful career. Yes.
Okay.
When once you become a geisha in the post-war era, it's now considered successful. You have become successful in what you wanted to do. And of course, the geisha returned highlighting and sticking to traditional Japanese standards, right? And they were proclaimed as highly skilled performers and artists once again.
Okay.
So this was during the post-war era, right? And of course,
So, what's the significance of their makeup that they wear? Because, I mean, you see a lot of, or I mean, I guess you could say all, since, like, I guess you could say the beginning of geishas, that they have to have a certain makeup routine, if you will.
that's a good question. Perfect. So, when I went to see the geisha show in Kyoto, right? When I did my geisha experience in Kyoto,
Uh-huh.
the interpreter, right, who was interpreting for the geisha, she told us that in the past, of course, there was no electricity, right? So in the era before electricity, the artist had to entertain by dim candlelight. So basically,
Okay.
everything had to be done by candlelight. So eventually, the geishas started painting their faces white to look more beautiful in these conditions.
Because it's dim lighting.
Yeah, it's dim lighting, right? So apparently, like, the lighting makes, the painted face look more out there. It stands out more.
Okay.
So that's the reason why, geishas, kabuki actors, court ladies, and the dancers, and other Japanese performers, they ended up adapting to the white makeup, which is the oshiroi, or the shironuri in Japanese.
Okay.
Right? Just because, like, they had to do everything with candlelight, and because of, like, the painting, it said that it reflects more.
I don't know. That was good to hear.
So not only the face is painted, but the neck, the front, and the back is painted, basically, right? And basically, the geishas, the girls, they're the ones that put the white on by themselves. They put the white makeup on themselves.
Okay.
Right, that's how it is. They put the white makeup on, and then eventually in the end, another person does the rest. The eyeliner, all that stuff. All right, so the geishas only take care of the white themselves.
All right.
So that was pretty interesting, and that alone takes like half an hour. That's what the geisha told us. That
The translator told you that?
Yeah, that the makeup alone took like half an hour.
All right.
Yeah, like with everything.
Well, I mean, I guess considering they can't really see much in the dark, they'd probably have to do something quickly at that point. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but everything else, like dressing, from the kimono, all that good stuff, the makeup, it's like an hour and a half
Oh.
for everything.
Okay.
It's like an hour and a half.
Gotcha.
So eyebrows are laid down with special paste, the tsubushi, as they have to paint with red and black pigment. And some geishas do shave their eyebrows, so it's easier to apply the makeup.
Yes, that's fair.
Exactly.
Okay. So, I mean, why would they want to preserve the arts? You said they preserve the arts in the tea houses, or just
Both.
Both. Okay.
Because in one phrase, it's really just preservation of culture, of tradition. Because everything that they do is part of Japanese culture and tradition ever since the Edo period, right? And they basically want to bring that out into the world.
So, what's something that they preserve that's from the Edo period? That's like something that they want to upkeep, if you will. Is there anything that?
Just the dances.
Just the dance.
in the music.
Okay.
Just the dance and the music, yeah. And basically, yeah, I mean, of course, many people are wondering, like, how does one become a geisha? Is that something, you know, you were probably thinking about? Obviously, how does one become a geisha?
I mean, for those that do ask, yeah, they'll probably be the ones asking that at some point. I'm just barely understanding this, so
okay,
feel free to explain.
So, in order to be a geisha, girls start as young as 15 years old. So they have to graduate from middle school if they want to become a geisha, before they become a geisha, before they want to pursue that path. So literally high school level. So
here in the States, it's crazy to think that someone going into high school can already work and work to be a geisha. At least from U.S. standards. Obviously, in Japan, that might be a different standard.
Or anywhere else in the anywhere else in the world, really. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so basically, if a girl decides that she wants to be a geisha, then she doesn't need to go to high school because she's basically already training to her profession already. Like, she's already an apprentice yet, okay. And basically, what they're called, right? These girls who are at 15 years old, they're known as Maikos. Right, they're known.
You mentioned about Michaels.
Yeah, they're known as the Michaels, right? So of course they just need to send their photo, fill in a survey, and basically, of course, get the parents' approval.
I would hope so. I mean, you're 15. Yeah.
Exactly, and of course it still has to go with basics, with Japanese basics and like humility and decorum. Basically, like decorum, Japanese decorum.
Okay.
Of course, it's like you're not gonna do something without your parents' permission, right? Especially if it's like a geisha, right? If it's a profession where you have to dance,
be an entertainer, essentially.
Be an entertainer, right? So the geishas end up working at a special district called Haramachi, which means flower town, where they will practice, work, and even live, right? And there are actually 5 separate geisha neighborhoods in Kyoto, and the first one is Kamishiken, which is the beginning, right? The beginning of geisha. Yeah, which is the beginning of the geisha, right? The beginnings of the district. And the Gion Kobu, which is established near the Yasaka Shrine, Miyagawacho, which is located close to the Ibisu Shrine and Keninjin Temple, while Gion Higashi, which is Gion Tea District, right, worships the Kanki Shrine.
The Kanki Shrine.
And the 5th district, Pontocho, is next to the Kamo and the Takase River.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these are all within the Gion district where all the apprentices start. They can be placed in any of the 5 districts, or is it just like in an ascending order? Okay.
Exactly. So basically, like, yeah, so as teenagers, right, as these teenage girls basically are getting the training that they need, right? So from 15 to 20, they're known as Michaels. They're officially getting trained, and then all of a sudden, when they're 21, that's when they end up becoming the Geikos. They become
the next stage,
where they become the full-fledged geishas.
Okay.
And that's where they start doing their actual work. That's where they're actually working. They're making their living. And the one I actually met, the geisha that was performing for us, she was actually 30.
Oh,
she was 30. I think she was.
Oh, she 30s. Was a Geiko.
Yeah, she was already a Geiko.
Okay.
So she was in her 30s. She was already in her late 20s, early 30s.
Okay.
Right. So that was. So she said that she literally told me that she made her decision to become a geisha when she was 12 years old. Like when she was 12 years old, and I asked that question. I was the one that asked her, like, oh, like, what age did you wanted to become a geisha? And she's like, oh, I was 12 years old when I decided to become one. And I was like, huh, that's good. Very interesting.
Insane.
Yeah, exactly. But other than that, she was really
I mean, it's one thing to say it,
beautiful.
and it's another to like wait those 3 years until you can actually fulfill that dream and aspiration of being a geisha.
Exactly. But here's the thing. So many people there's one thing that people tend to ask: are geishas prostitutes? Are geishas?
Is that because of like how World War II came around, like how you said earlier, and people
You are
were
literally on the right track right there. You are on the right track. So, for all you people listening to our podcast for this episode, right? The image of the geishas as prostitutes was popularized, dun, 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 get this, by American soldiers after World War II.
was that before or after they entered Japan during the war?
No, this was after World War II. Like,
Okay.
literally at the end of the war. Like, during the post-war era. During the occupation period. That the United States did in Japan. So the whole idea about geishas being prostitutes was popularized by the American soldiers, right? That's not the case. Geishas have always been a symbol of beauty and elegance. So girls from the lower social classes would always tend to introduce themselves to American soldiers as geishas. Right,
Okay.
from the lower classes. Like, oh, look, we're these beautiful, young Japanese girls, right? Here to fulfill your fantasies that you have about Japan or whatever you've been told about Japan, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, we're geishas, and most likely, in that case, they were most likely prostitutes, though. They were part of the geisha girls, like, prostitute, like, circle that happened in Japan, right?
Okay.
And of course, that's how the myth would eventually spread all over the world, right? However, though, there were courtesans, right? There were courtesans who were working arm in arm with the geishas at the same entertainment districts. So they were in the same area.
Both
But-
geisha girls and the actual geishas
Courtesans.
themselves.
Well, the geishas and the courtesans. Yeah. They were working the same entertainment district. So that was always a confusion because these both professions always worked in the same district.
Would it be difficult to distinguish between someone that is?
Actually, no. Actually, no. It's not. It's not very hard to know between a geisha and a courtesans. All right. So before we get into that, let me read something from Arthur Golden, the writer of Memoirs of a Geisha. Remember, Chio, geisha are not courtesans, and we are not wives. We sell our skills, not our bodies. We create another secret world, a place only of beauty. The very word geisha means artist, and to be a geisha is to be judged as a moving work of art.
Okay.
So that could not have been any more clear. Like, that statement cannot be any more clear. Because the Japanese word of geisha in the Kyoto dialect is artist. But also, where the part where it says we are not wives, right? However, if a geisha plans on getting married, if a geisha does plan on getting married, she must leave the profession forever.
So this is just like a conclave of nuns, only in Japanese culture. Because I mean,
Oh, man,
they're not allowed to
speaking of
marry
conclave.
either at that point, like you said, because they would have to leave the
Profession.
profession.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of conclave.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
now that
but-
you mention, well, because I didn't,
Yeah.
it never would have struck my mind to ask like, oh, can you still be a geisha and can you still be a geisha while married? And now that you mentioned it, you said they can't, or at least they won't be able to at that point.
Exactly. Right. So the way how you're able to distinguish it is basically just by the kimonos they wear. So basically,
A courtesan wears what?
a courtesan is more flashy. Like, she's out there. like a lot of kimonos, right? Wearing a heavy hairstyle, having a lot of pins on her wig, right? And also she wears the really high shoes, the
The
platform shoes, like
the
really.
ones that are like not wood, but like
No, yeah, they're
the
wood.
Japanese one.
Yeah, they're wood, but they're really high, and of course, like
We'll
for a
insert pictures for you
geisha,
guys. Don't worry.
yeah,
Um,
and of course, like a geisha's more simple, more humble, in her kimono wearing.
are the colors different from like a courtesan's point of view,
They
and
tend
then
to be more bright.
a courtesan's more bright, and then what the traditional ones are more muted.
Yeah, muted. But the difference between the courtesans and the geishas, the one way you could tell the difference is the way they tie their sash.
So sash from a geisha
Yeah,
is covered.
the sash from the geisha. The geishas tie their sashes from the back,
Geisha's ties in the back. Okay, and then
but
the
then
corn.
with the courtesans tie their sash in the front.
Oh, okay,
Exactly, exactly. So
okay. Good to know. Good to know. So that happens. So, um, so that clears up that confusion. Um, is there anything else that you wanted to touch base on?
honestly, my main concern is when it comes to tourists visiting Japan. I don't blame them. I don't blame them, but it's just that like they still have the notion about you know geishas being viewed as prostitutes. Like
Even after the clarification?
like unfor well maybe they haven't been taught about Japanese culture that
Okay.
much. Yeah, they know about Japanese culture, but it's just that like they haven't been educated enough in it, right? And all of a sudden, when they go visit Japan, right, especially in Kyoto, they start misbehaving. I don't know why they start misbehaving, but they do all sorts of things with them, like touching their kimonos without their permission, right? Or taking photos of them, you know, without their permission either, because literally there are geishas that do have like photo copyrights.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Well, that would have been another question. I mean, do tea houses allow people to record or take pictures while in there, or is it just specific ones in the Gion district that don't allow it?
so you can record. You can record in the tea houses if you see a geisha. Like you can record, but in some cases you're not allowed to post your pictures or your videos on social media because of the privacy rights. So like for example, I have pictures
Oh,
and a
because of
video.
the okay, yeah.
I have pictures and videos of the geisha that performed for us when I went, but I'm not allowed to post it online or like on social media, or unfortunately
Yeah.
on here on the video for like our YouTube video. I can't do that. I'm sorry guys, but it's out of respect and out of courtesy, and to protect their right, their privacy rights. It's out of it's out of respect. Please understand that, okay? They're not doing it because they're being mean, or they're being like bossy. It's just because it's out of courtesy and out of respect for the girl's privacy.
Okay.
You know.
I didn't know that. I mean that was just another question about given everything that you mentioned from their like the training and then like how young they start and stuff like that. So I guess that does make sense. Why they upheld their privacy.
Exactly.
They don't recommend. They don't allow. I should say prohibit. Um, them posting stuff on social media.
Exactly. And honestly, last year, I was so mad last year. This happened literally at this time. It happened at this time, where the Japanese government, I think it was either the government of Japan or the Kyoto city government, right? They ended up making a motion. They made a motion to ban foreigners from the Gion district,
from entering the Gion district
basically without like permission,
from
from
the Kyoto governor,
from the either from the local government or from
just this
or like
country,
like those in the district, like those in the district, right?
So either the district governor or just people or just the officials in Kyoto.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like, honestly, it's like just because of the actions of a few people who, like I said, unfortunately didn't get the education that they needed in regards to knowing like the protocols when it comes to like seeing or meeting with geishas, right? It's like because of a few, it's like everyone suffers. It's like, come on, like, are you guys being for real right now? It's like,
yeah,
I know, like, and honestly, it's like, it's like they can feel the geishas can feel more uncomfortable as it is because they're young. Majority of the geishas that you see in Kyoto are young. Like the Maikos, like like they're young, like they're teenagers, like they're in their late teens and their early 20s, right? It's like
you gotta respect the privacy that they have. Not anyone. There's not. Not everyone wants to have their identity of being exposed from foreigners.
Well, not exposed, but like just don't touch.
Yeah.
Like don't touch. Like do you guys know how expensive kimonos are? Like literally, like kimonos are so expensive. They're like in the thousands of dollars.
Oh, if you were to translate it to U.S. currency, okay.
In U.S. currency, kimonos are like thousands of dollars. Like some can even go up to like $10,000.
Is it because of the fabric?
Yes, because of the fabric and just the time and effort it gets into making a kimono.
Okay.
So don't touch. So please do not. If you ever go to Kyoto, if you ever see a geisha out in public, whether it's in Kyoto, in Kanazawa, or any other places that have geishas, do not touch their kimonos. Please, people, do not touch their kimonos. All right, these women. This is their life. This is their careers, right? This is basically what they dedicated their life to. Okay, and unfortunately, like, no offense, but essentially for Westerners who go visit Japan, and they ended up just touching their kimonos without the permission and like just saying whatever, right? Or they are just like getting frustrated because they are not able to get a photo opportunity. It's like that doesn't give you the right to bug them or disrespect them.
Okay.
So there you have it, right? I'm sorry, I had to. If you think I'm lashing out, I'm sorry if you think I'm lashing out if I'm being like a butthole or things like like that. I'm sorry, but it does have to be said. Okay, It does have to be said.
Well, on that note, thank you guys for sticking around till the end and listening through this topic of the geishas. If you like what you saw, if you appreciate what you listened to, feel free to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. And comment what you liked about the episode or any questions that you have about, Geisha's topic overall.
Or, like if you liked it, if you want to give like a like, right? If you say, oh, good job, like, or I didn't know that, or of course you want to comment things like, oh yeah, people need to, whatever you need to comment, right? And honestly, I would have to say, we do read the comments, right? Especially like our North Korean episode. We saw some really interesting comments on that one, right? So again, it's a place for you to leave your comments, right? Leave your thoughts, right, about our episodes, or if you want to bring something into the conversation, please do.
On our next episode, you will hear us speak about the Yasukuni Shrine, which as mentioned, and if you search it up, it's basically a shrine dedicated to Japanese soldiers who died in the war for the emperor themselves. Should all soldiers from the war be remembered and honored. Feel free to find out the next time you hear from us. So until then, this has been your host,
Martin.
and Jose, and thank you guys as we take a drink with the past. Come by.
Come by.